to my sewing room. The theme for today is called Heirlooms for Your Home. Let's begin with several things I have right here. This is a lovely pillow sham done out of a linen and cotton blend, which is so great for machine embroidery. The initials MCP, those are my initials, are right in the middle, and notice that beautiful scalloped edge done in ecru thread. And by the way, in next week's show, we'll share with you how to do a corded scalloped edge. This is one of my favorite pillow shams in the whole world. When redoing a new bedroom, why not make your beautiful pillow shams and your bedspread too? This might be called the kitchen sink pillow sham, and you probably know why. I've used everything in the world out of my stash, from old linens, torn up doilies, a little bit of everything, and just zigzagged it all together for a beautiful pillow sham. Now, you can also purchase, now we made this bedspread by doing cotton sateen and all the layers, sending it away to have it quilted, but you know what? You could purchase a bedspread and then put the beautiful French lace on the very edge. Come on over to the technique boards with me, and I'll share with you some really wonderful ideas on how to make beautiful linens for your bedroom. If you don't have a resource center just loaded with all of these wonderful pieces, such as old linens and crocheted doilies and old embroideries, just go to a local antique store. They will have plenty, and usually they're not too expensive. Now here I have started working on my piece. I'm just going to have a whole lot of fun and wrap this piece of braid around. I'm going to pin it just any way I want to, and then continue to get some more pieces. Now after I have embellished the front, I will gather a ruffle, then right sides to right sides, put it all the way around my pillow, put the back to the pillow on, sew it up almost all the way, and then when I turn it right side out, I will have a magnificent pillow sham to redecorate my bedroom, but actually I'll need two unless I have twin beds. Here is what the finished pillow sham looks like after I've had all the fun, and this one even has a little bit of lace around the edge. Isn't that pretty? I'm telling you, I don't think you can make a prettier bedroom than ecru on ecru and pillow shams that look like these. Now this is another type of pillow which I love, love, love. Once again, it's handkerchief linen and cotton. I really like that blend for linens, and it's less expensive than linen. This is what you call a European pillow sham, but you put a regular pillow or even a bigger pillow. This has a Swiss motif inserted in the middle. That comes from Switzerland, but actually they're available made in the USA also. All right, here is the motif, the big motif we used. Here is a smaller one, which are more readily available than the bigger ones, but either one would just be great. Now, how do you attach it and how do you make this pillow? First of all, I take the motif, just simply lay it down on the pillow, then I straight stitch it and then zigzag it either or, and then I come in behind and simply trim away the fabric from behind, and then I finish my pillow with the gathered lace around the edge. Very easy to do, and a really pretty pillow also. I bet you haven't even thought about decorating sheets. Well, you can make your own sheet, or you might want to buy a sheet and just put a really lovely embellishment at the top. Here is a pretty sheet which would, well, it's kind of a small sheet. I think this might be a doll sheet, but you get the idea. Here is a pretty sheet with an English lace netting on the top, and you would sew this on the back, where when you folded your sheet back, this would be on the top. And here is another really pretty one. This time this is a Swiss eyelet embroidery, and you could use an American embroidery, or you could make a ruffle and just use a pretty scalloped edge on your sewing machine and do some of those pretty embroideries. Oh my goodness, you can embellish sheets and just have fun and never really do any cutting or sewing. This is another beautiful pillowcase. This time it's called Shadow Scallops, and there is a blue lining in behind here. I'll just hold it up so you can see. Now this one is stitched by hand, feather stitched by hand. You could also do that by machine. All right, here's what you do. You sew on, I have to unpin a little bit here, a piece of blue fabric onto the bottom of the pillowcase. Now this is the back. I fold it up to the back, draw the scallops or scallops, whichever way you pronounce it, on, and then I can do it one of two ways. If I'm going to trim it by hand, I can come in here and trim away these scallops now, and then just do my feather stitch by hand. Don't worry about that raw edge, it's not going to hurt a thing. If I want to do this by machine, I will come in and do my machine feather stitch, or zigzag, or machine a wing needle entredot. I will come in and machine it all the way around the pillowcase, and then I will trim it afterwards. But this makes a really beautiful pillowcase with the blue or whatever color you choose peeking through. These really make nice gifts too. Another way of trimming a pillowcase is to attach entredot and gathered lace edging. I'm going to show you that technique in just a minute, entredot and gathered lace edging. And then the top one has entredot and flat lace. If you'll come over to the sewing machine with me, I'll show you just how easy it is to attach entredot to a flat surface, and to make it a gathered, all you do is just gather. First of all, this is another pillowcase, really pretty, which has entredot and a wide piece of Swiss edging. This would be the technique entredot to flat fabric and entredot to flat fabric. To attach entredot to flat fabric, first of all, I have a piece of Swiss entredot, and I'm going to attach it to the raw edge by going stitch in the ditch of the entredot. That's the straight stitching, step number one. The next step is to trim. As you can see, I've already trimmed this side. I'm going to trim it down to, about an eighth, probably about a quarter of an inch seam allowance, to tell you the truth. The first one was stitch in the ditch, and then I trim, and then I'm going to, let me go over to the sewing machine here. I've already got it set and ready to go. I'm going to zigzag that finished edge, and I am not stitching into the holes of the entredot. I'm only stitching up to the holes of the entredot. My stitch width is wide enough to go all the way across that unfinished edge and kind of roll and whip it. Now, I also can, I don't really have to just do this in 3 steps, stitch in the ditch, trim, and zigzag. I can also do this on the serger. Here is how it looks when it is finished. In other words, stitch in the ditch, trim, and zigzag. That is my finished look right there after I've done 3 steps. And you know the little secret, you can also do all 3 of those at one time on the serger. Here are the different kinds of fabrics and laces you can use for entredot to flat fabric. I can use the English lace that has a raw edge, it is not finished, and use that, stitch in the ditch, trim, and zigzag. I can also use a piece of the Swiss eyelet, which is what I've used here. Once again, it's a raw edge, so I would, when attaching my entredot, I would stitch in the ditch, trim, and zigzag, and then I would have a really pretty finish, just like these other ones that I have shown you. Isn't that a pretty finish? You can see all of the entredot there. And next, I'm going to share with you a really cute technique for working on that Noah's Ark quilt. You're going to like this technique for 3-dimensional applique. Now, we've used lots of techniques on this Noah's Ark quilt, but the little bird has a 3-dimensional applique wing, and there's several little birds, and I'm going to come down. Oh, the little duck has a, well, actually it looks like a chicken, but it really is the color of a duck. Anyway, the little duck has a 3-dimensional applique wing. Now, I've asked Louise Baird if she will share with you exactly how she made those 3-dimensional applique wings. Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. The 3-dimensional applique really adds a lot of detail when you're doing applique. To start off with, I've enlarged the duck so that you can see it a little bit better. And the first thing I usually do is to trace the design, whatever it is. In this case, it's the wing, on a piece of water-soluble stabilizer. And most of the time when a shape is like this that I can't really tell the right or the wrong side, I'll write up or right side or something on the water-soluble stabilizer so that I know which way to stitch. Then I make a sandwich using a water-soluble stabilizer with a pattern on the top, a piece of fabric that's right side up, a batting or another piece of fabric, another piece of fabric wrong side up, and another piece of water-soluble stabilizer. It's sort of like a Solvay sandwich. Okay, after that I usually put it in a hoop and stitch around it. Now it's not necessary to put it in a hoop, but the hoop allows you to stitch and maneuver a little bit easier. Okay, after you have stitched around it with a narrow open zigzag, I usually use about a 1 width and a 1 length to do the stitching. Then I trim away the excess fabric and top layer of Solvay and the batting so that I'm left with just the shape that I want to be three-dimensional. Okay, here I've got it in my hoop already where I've trimmed away all of the top layers of the fabric and the Solvay and batting, and now I'm ready to satin stitch. It's really important to satin stitch, or when you're in satin stitching, to go completely off of your fabric and onto the Solvay. This creates a much more rounded edge on your piece and also covers up the raw edges. You need to remember when you're trimming to trim close to the stitching, because the neatness that you create with your trimming will affect the final neatness of your piece. Okay, after you completely finish doing going around the shape, then you have a piece, your finished piece with still on Solvay. Okay, then all you really need to do is tear it apart and take the Solvay or water-soluble stabilizer off the front and the back, and then you want to attach it to your shape. Now here I've got it ready to go on a duck, and I'm going to use just a straight stitch that will give me, just to stitch it down, I'm going to use just the straight stitch and stitch, and that's what will attach it without sewing completely around it. You can put as many rows as you want to give it the look that you want it to have. And that's all there is to doing this.
Just looking at you do that makes it seem so easy, and I actually know that it is easy. Louise, thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha.
Next, I have a wonderful vest to show you how to change old and torn up unusable quilts to a brand new beautiful vest. This is the most wonderful vest. The sleeves actually button off. In other words, it is a real vest. It is a real vest, and yet it has some wonderful sleeves that button on to make it into a jacket. Now, some of you are thinking, uh-oh, she's cut up an old quilt. That's a no-no. Well, let me tell you why this one's okay. This quilt is so bad that the cotton batting is falling out all over it. It is really torn up, holes in it and everything, but we have put a tulle layer over it so we really can use it. Isn't that a pretty quilt? And let me show you how pretty it is on the inside with all of the different goodies just cut and pasted, and you know what I mean, cut and paste. But I just think that's the most wonderful way to use a really torn up quilt. Of course, you would never, ever cut up any kind of an old quilt unless it was completely unusable. This is another vest made out of that same pattern, which is the pattern for our series, using all kinds of goodies attached to a totally torn up quilt. I mean totally torn up. Okay. This is the idea of the quilt vest with the batting. It has the tulle layer that's over it, and then you've just sort of done all the things to it. Then I've used a piece of bias binding to simply bind off the edges of the vest. Now, here are the sleeves, and once again it illustrates, let me illustrate to you how torn up this quilt is. I mean, the batting is coming out everywhere. I would consider that totally unusable until you put a piece of tulle over it. And then you can embellish it by stitching down, see, doing the extra stitching across here. It really looks beautiful, and it is a way that you can use without feeling any guilt whatsoever those really, really torn up quilts. An idea is to never, ever, ever cut up anything that is usable. It's not fun. It's very much a no-no to cut up an old quilt just to make a garment unless the quilt is totally unusable, completely in rags, and just would have to be thrown away otherwise. This is a vest front. Once again, the completely demolished quilt there, batting falling out, rotten fabric. Now, once I put the tulle over it though, it gives it a new life. So I have tulle completely covering my little torn up quilt, which is going to have a new life after I finish sewing it. I have put little pieces of crochet with a button, a little piece of a handkerchief that might go over an area that is especially bad. Here's an old collar. Here is ribbon which is twisted. Up here is a towel, an embroidered tea towel, and a Battenberg doily. And all in the world I'm going to do is start to zigzag it. All right, I'm ready to go, and I'm just going to zigzag in the same color thread. Probably this whole quilt will be done in white. I'm going to zigzag the pieces down. This happens to be an old piece of a towel, kind of a tea towel, that was completely stained, and actually most of it was rotten. But then again, we could salvage enough to use in just this one little section, so I didn't feel guilty about cutting it up either. But remember, we've got the tulle on top, and then we've just had fun embellishing. Next, my friend Beverly Sheldrick is going to share with you some wonderful silk ribbon treats. I'm so happy to have today my friend Beverly Sheldrick. Beverly is a New Zealand author and needle artist, and she has authored the book Colonial Inspirations. Beverly, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you, Martha, for having me. Today, Martha, we're going to show your viewers the very simple rosebud that decorates this Hussif that we've been working on over the last few weeks. You will see we have a straight stitch, we have a lazy daisy each side, and then we put little stitches to form the stem and put a wee bit of greenery around here. I've just done a little sample here using silk ribbon where you're using a bigger one. It just gives us a little stronger definition. Here we have it with just the thread. So here we go. First of all, that straight stitch, then a lazy daisy either side. And with this one, Martha, we're not going to put any elongation. As you know, normally when I do a lazy daisy stitch, I elongate it and give it a little extra point to it. But we're not going to do that today. We're just going to do this like this. So it looks as though it's just about to burst into butt. It doesn't want to go through, just like there we are, and down we come. Then we're going to take our next one and come up actually in the thread, and we're going to put in these little short stitches like this. There's the third one, and then we're going to put extra down here, and we will then put a stem on it like we've got here. So here we are with the Hussif, and here they are, the rosebuds here. Now, Martha, I'm also going to show your viewers how to make these little pockets, which once you know how to do one, you've got a lot of them done. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here, and this one here is also the same way of doing it. Very simple, but very precise. You will see on this sample here that I have taken an oblong of fabric, I have fused it. I have drawn the pattern on one side, I have done the embroidery, and then I'm going to just fold it in half, and I'm going to stitch using a slightly shorter stitch length than you would normally do. I'm going to stitch from here right the way round and back to there. That's going to be my opening. You will also see that I have marked the fold lines which are here, and I'm actually going to put in a little stitch across. You can see here how I've done that, so I know exactly where I've allowed for my seam to be. Now I've got this wee sample here because I want to show you that when you come to trim this, you're going to trim it just much closer than you would normally do. You can see like this that I'm really very close to that line, and this is Dupion silk, Dupioni silk as you call it in this country, and because it frays so badly, by fusing it, despite the fact that this is a very short seam, it will not pull through. So we trim it like that and then take it through. Now we then have our next piece all ready for the next step, and I'm going to put blanket stitching all the way round. Now I know that technically this is not the correct way to do blanket stitch, but I find by doing it upside down again, that's the trouble when you live on the other side of the world. You do things, everything upside down. But I find by doing it in this way, it helps me to get the stitches even. So I will go across there and I will go all the way round again, in the same way as you see I've done here. I've gone all the way round, but also I'm going to blanket stitch on the inside around here. Now you might wonder, why do I know where to start there? And it's quite simple. You just bring this up like that and you start just a little bit lower than that with these inside blanket stitches. So when you open your flap, there you've got your lovely dragonfly and the stitching inside there. Now we're going to go to this next piece. You will see that we have the pencil case here. I've got it pinned onto the fabric like this. I've got my blanket stitching going around like that. I've come up like this, and before I start to do the seam there, what I've actually got to do is I have got to machine it onto the fabric. Now there's just one thing that you really need to take care of here, and that is this. We have this under piece here, which is our pocket. Take that to the back, because we don't want to open our zip and find our pocket is all stitched together. You will see I have stitched around here like this. I normally like to use the width of the foot of the machine, and there's a very good reason why I do it this way, and that is this, that we come up like that, it means that the pencil will sit very firmly in. I then bring this up to here, I have whipped across there, and I'm now going to whip these together, going through all of these stitches like this.
Just a whip with no blanket
it's
stitch there.
Just a whip. I'm going through
Beverly.
all of those blanket stitches, and there we have the seam done. And that will go there.
Thank you so much, Beverly. That is so beautiful. And now won't you join me in my attic? This petticoat is absolutely fabulous. It almost has a teepee lace shape. I'm not going to really show you anything about the top because it's an ordinary petticoat top, but oh, wait until you see the details. This segment of the petticoat has crisscrossed flip-flop lace that comes down. Can you notice the pin tucks that are in the middle? That comes down and makes a V. Everything is flip-flopped. And then this beautiful hand embroidery. It almost seems like grapes are there. Then tucked inside the tuck, before we get to the next piece like that, let me open this up for you, is truly what looks like a teepee to me. The two laces cross over in the top, they come down, there are pin tucks in between the shape, it flip-flops around, almost rounded, and then it goes back up. I really like the idea of those pin tucks tucked in the middle. Now here is a gathered lace on the bottom, and the under petticoat, which on these beautiful clothes was sometimes as elaborate as the over petticoat, has a really pretty ruffle, a batiste part of the ruffle, and then the most gorgeous lace you've ever laid your eyes on. That lace from France is really hard to find today, and it would be probably just as hard to pay for it if you could find it. Thank you so much for joining me today in my sewing room. I've really had a good time, and I hope you have too. Won't you come back next time?